British ships had outsailed, outfought, and outtraded their rivals on all the 7 oceans of the unfolding modern world by the middle of the 19th century. It was this mastery of the seas which had swept British armies, politics, and the English language as an imperial signature across the world. Imperial interests in Africa had so far been slight. Africa was something to be sailed around rather than acquired. That was about to change. The ships of many nations had traded around the coasts of Africa, first for slaves and less profitable cargoes. Political involvement in the continent had been taken on reluctantly, but in the second half of the 19th century, the European powers were to approach Africa more greedily. A great diplomatic game was about to start, and it began at sea. The historic sea route to India required the Cape of Good Hope as a staging post. Africa had always meant India to Britain. But there was a new back door to the east, Suez. There had long been the overland route through the desert from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. Now one man decided to cut a ship canal through those blistering miles of hot sand. Ferdinand de Lesseps, backed by France, opposed by Britain, showed that there was no need for locks between the two seas. You could sail straight through. You only needed to float a company, to buy the concessions, labour, harbours, engineering, machinery. Bankers made loans and shipowners subscribed for shares. 200 million francs. Work began in 1859 to dig a waterway to float the largest ships from Europe to the east. And by 1869, the Khedive of Egypt was inviting the royal houses of Europe and the dignitaries of the world to the celebration of the opening of his canal. Designed to attract capital to Egypt, it also served to focus Europe's political interest on the continent of Africa, almost for the first time. It was to be an extravagant echo of the days of the pharaohs. Verdi was commissioned to write the party music. He wrote Aida. But the real show was the canal itself. The guest list was comprehensive. Her Imperial Majesty the Empress Eugenie of France. His Royal Highness the Prince Henry of the Netherlands. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince Frederick of Prussia. Her Royal Highness the Princess Sophia of the Netherlands. His Imperial Majesty Franz Joseph, Emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Champagne flowed like the Nile in flood. Dinners, balls, banquets, everything free to impress the bankers. Later they wanted their money back. But by then, the party was over. Queen Victoria did not attend the party, but when the Khedive was obliged to cash in his canal shares, it was Benjamin Disraeli, her Prime Minister, who bought them for her. For 4 million sterling. "You have it, madam," he told the delighted Queen. Now Britain held the key of both doors to her Indian Empire. An era of imperialism began. To comment on its hopes and its heroes, to provide the working class at home with a theatrical history book, there was the music hall.
Great Dizzy, our Premier, knows well his book. He's as tricky as here and there one. When he purchased the Suez Canal, we all thought it the very best thing he had done. Since then of our Queen, he's an empress maid. And however the public may jeer, he's got his reward, for the Queen in return, as Earl Beaconsfield's made him a peer. Well, I wonder what next he will do. I wonder what next he will do. Great Dizzy is busy, he's not a fool, is he? I wonder what next he will do.
What next? Well, a new challenge was developing at the other end of Africa. For years, prospectors had been searching for the gold that would make a success of the Cape and Natal colonies. Then, in 1867, a whisper went round the world. Soon, men arrived with an assortment of clumsy contraptions and put them to work. Someone had found a bit of glass that would cut glass. The whisper became a shout. The diamond rush was on. The rolling scrubland of South Africa was to be torn apart. Adventurers, financiers and plain crooks from all over the world, and many local farmers too, sought a quick fortune in the crowded claims of the diamond fields. African tribesmen were drawn into this search for the pretty beads so feverishly sought by their new masters. The Africans were uncertain what it all meant. It was very strange and confusing. To Europe it was quite clear. The first visible sign that Africa was after all a treasure house to be ransacked appeared as a single great hole in the ground and a cobweb of cables reaching into it. The hole spawned a money-mad shanty town called Kimberley. Today, the Kimberley Museum preserves some of the old trappings. Once there were dancers here, all the way from Paris. Up-to-date naughtiness for the tired digger with diamonds in his belt. It was a very mixed community, a strange European phenomenon isolated in the African bush. Miners and merchants, legal diamond buyers and illegal ones too, and a big contingent of camp followers from the army of Victorian prostitutes seeking their share of the diamonds in the bars and shanties of Kimberley. To the Bible-reading, God-fearing Boer farmers, it was Sodom and Gomorrah. Soon there was also an imitation London club in Kimberley. For one young man who came to Africa for his health, it provided a more congenial atmosphere. There were hunting parties, but the big game was diamonds, and Cecil Rhodes was to prove the greatest hunter of them all. Among these ambitious men, Rhodes was the conqueror. He conquered with his charm, with his vision, or his money. They became his apostles, One, Alfred Beit, had said to him, "I am going to control the whole diamond output." Rhodes replied, "So am I. We had better join hands." Another, Barney Bonato, the East End Jew, fought Rhodes bitterly but lost, and then also joined him to give Rhodes' company, De Beers, the monopoly of the Kimberley diamonds. Rhodes' personality still dominates this club. There are some 27 pictures of him on its walls. A fitting tribute to the man whose mastery of business deals astonished and discomforted many. Rhodes added claim to claim and man to man. Then as the groupings grew bigger and bigger and fewer, like musical chairs, he played company off against company until finally he took the jackpot. He was a multimillionaire by the time he was 35. But diamonds as jewellery, as adornments for royal crowns or women, did not interest him, any more than women did. For him, the millions of pounds worth of diamonds that passed through De Beers' sorting rooms represented not money, but power. Ownership was nothing. When he owned it all at last, Rhodes said,
"When I am in Kimberley, I often go and stand on the edge of the De Beers mine, and I reckon up the value of the diamonds in it and the power conferred by them. Every foot of blue ground confers so much power."
And yet, on and off, during 8 of the years of this power building, Rhodes was living a second and wholly different life, remote from the diamond fever and the town of Kimberley. 6,000 miles away in the ivory towers of Oxford, he sought, as an undergraduate of 23 at Oriel College, quite another kind of power. One day in 1876, a lecture by John Ruskin at Oxford gave a new dimension to Cecil Rhodes' ambition.
"This is what England must do or perish. She must found colonies as fast and far as she is able, formed of her most energetic and worthiest men, and there teach these her colonists that their chief virtue is to advance the power of England by land and sea. We are still undegenerate in race, a race mingled of the best northern blood. We are not yet dissolute in temper, but still have the firmness to govern and the grace to obey."
It was the stuff that dreams were made of. Only Rhodes was not a dreamer, charmed though he was by the grace and learning of Oxford, but a very practical young man with unlimited confidence, almost unlimited money, and boundless imagination. Ruskin had provided a creed by which he and his fellow youths of England could achieve greatness. It would be Rhodes' wealth and power that would launch them. Ruskin had said it with words. Rhodes would say it with diamonds. Rhodes restated the imperial creed.
"I contend that we are the first race in the world, and the more of the world we inhabit, the better. Every acre added to our territory provides for the birth of more of the English race. I have viewed the people of the world and have come to the conclusion that the English-speaking race has the highest ideal of justice, liberty, and peace. Therefore, I shall devote the rest of my life to advancing the English, the greatest people the world has ever seen, whose fault is that they do not know their strength or their destiny."
They fascinated him, these Oxford men, learning to see life steadily and see it whole. They had the balance of the ancient Greeks, the clear-eyed beauty, testing themselves in athletics for tasks to come. Moderns they must be, of course, in an age of enlightenment, propriety and godliness, reflecting the symmetry of the Greeks, for to Rhodes, Oxford was the Athens of the English world. The classical tradition taught men how to rule themselves and others, a noble tradition which twice before had produced athletes and rulers. If you take young men trained in the disciplines of the body and the mind, not just in the style of the Greeks, but with the force, drive, and civic duty of the Romans, and with leadership such as the Romans knew from their great Caesars, what new great empire might not be built if a new Caesar could be found? Rome's power gave a new order to a greater world. Her armies wrote the chapters of the imperial history. Could there be a new Rome that would civilize the barbarians overseas and oblige them to submit and seek to become allies of Britain under the Pax Britannica? As Rome once had her praetorians, so Britain had hers too. When Rhodes, the undergraduate with an income of £50,000 a year, made his first will, his money was to be used, he said, to establish a secret society whose true aim and object shall be the extension of British rule throughout the world. The occupation by British settlers of the entire continent of Africa, the Holy Land, the valley of the Euphrates, the whole of South America, the Malay archipelago, the recovery of the United States of America as an integral part of the British Empire. Rhodes was quite serious, but his visions were not shared by the Colonial Office, which in South Africa especially had tried to curb colonial expansion. The settlers kept pressing on, the natives fought for their land, and war succeeded war. The land hunger of both the invading settlers and the native tribes was too great for peace between them. It wasn't just the British settlers. The Dutch Boers were expanding even more aggressively and provoked ever more bitter native reprisals, constantly drawing the British government into the fight. Negotiations and treaties were tried, but usually failed. There were to be some 9 Kaffir wars over 25 years. The biggest native war was to come. 500,000 Zulu warriors threatened the Boers in the Transvaal, which Britain had added to her colonies. 4 men paved the way to a tragedy. Sir Bartle Frere, governor of the Cape, decided that the Zulus must be disarmed, for he and his native commissioner Shepstone saw British supremacy threatened by the Zulu military machine. Lord Chelmsford, at the head of a large army, marched into Zululand to end forever the threat of the Zulu king Cetshwayo. Cetshwayo had seen his ancestral lands increasingly invaded by settlers and now by an invading army. In the valley of Isandlwana, an entire British battalion and some 500 auxiliary troops were wiped out almost to a man by the Zulu impis. The South Wales borderers, the 24th Foot, were among those to suffer. The music hall told their sad but noble story.
A story came one morning from a far and distant land that savages had massacred a small but gallant band. Against 20,000 foreign foes, mid thunder, shot and shell, 500 valiant English fought and nobly fighting fell. 500 valiant English fought and nobly fighting fell.
Cartoonists created the image of the hideous savage fit for retribution, on whom John Bull had set his bulldog. The grovelling savage would submit, and Chelmsford did defeat Cetshwayo, for which deed Britannia thanked him kindly. Chetawaya was brought to London as a prisoner. He proved to be a handsome, dignified man, not at all savage. In fact, he had tea with the Queen, who found him charming, and he had his picture taken by Bassano in Bond Street. William Gladstone became Liberal Prime Minister in 1881, pledged to restore independence to the Transvaal, but he hesitated. Paul Kruger, the leader of the Transvaal Boers, asked for action, but the political scene was changing. The game of Africa had begun. Britain and France were the first two players in a strange diplomatic game that was to be played in the capitals of Europe for the next 2 decades, a political carve-up known as the Scramble for Africa. It was like a monstrous Victorian children's game acted out by adults. The board is Africa. The dice, diplomacy and the chances of history. Britain's first throw brought her the Cape. Before the game is over, Africa will have changed colour and acquired new masters. France, in a post-Napoleonic flourish, crosses the Mediterranean, takes Algiers, and from Senegal makes her bid for West Africa. But the British player can fend off that move. His position is strong on the west coast. Britain establishes himself in Gambia, Sierra Leone, the Gold Coast, and round the Niger Delta. But there is a new part of Africa to open up by the 1870s, the Congo. France strengthens her position in Gabon and prepares to move inland. Britain strengthens her hand in the south, taking the Transvaal and creating a strong position for another advance north and west. The Boers don't want to play the game. They want independence for the Transvaal. A British brigade is sent to teach them the new rules. They march boldly. An army that had fought Napoleon could not take the resistance of a few farmers seriously. In an ambush, the British imperial presence is shot to ribbons. It is 1880, and the First Boer War has begun. Later, reinforcements attack again at Laing's Neck. This time they had bigger guns, manned by a detachment of the Royal Navy. Boers had trenches, were lifelong marksmen, and found the advancing formations of redcoats splendid targets. The British cavalry charged with all the style and courage of the Light Brigade in the Valley of Death, and just about as disastrously. It was a new kind of warfare. At the final battle for Majuba Hill, the British were shattered. The might of Britain had been humiliated by a few farmers with rifles. It was a difficult lesson to learn. The music hall could only preach revenge and condemn the incompetence of the military command.
On a hill far away, where the grass is burnt and grey, they stood us up against the sky. Easy targets for the foe, they arranged us in a row, and they bade us stand up and die. So we stood and died at Majuba. We died like Englishmen, and we're waiting the old flag again. We are stirring in our sleep, for we hear the marching feet that are bringing England's honour back again. Bringing back the flag to Majuba, bringing back the old flag again.
After Majuba, the game of Africa gathers pace. So a new player does join Britain and France at the table. The Transvaal Boers, having beaten the British in a real game of war, now demand their turn to bid for pieces on the board. The Boer throws, triumphantly removes the British presence, and claims his independence in the Transvaal. Britain concedes and turns his attention to the north. But now it is Britain's turn. Britain throws. A convenient bankruptcy and revolution in Egypt occurs, and Britain takes Egypt. Britain is now established in North Africa with a hold on the Nile. Britain hands the dice to France. But two new players come in and join the table, which is filling up. They get ready as France throws. Portugal, determined to fend off the moves against her old positions in Africa. Belgium, driven by forceful King Leopold, new to Africa but good at gamesmanship. France extends in North Africa to challenge Britain's bid for the whole Nile and gets busy in Somaliland and Tunisia. Belgium throws and moves into the Congo Basin, which brings France back into play. And France, occupying Gabon, takes over the north bank of the Congo. Portugal throws and heads off Belgium by extending Angola in the north. Mozambique is also extended northwards, blocking Britain's designs in East Africa. Another player has joined the game. Imperial Germany. Bismarck's Germany, master player in Europe, now takes a hand in Africa. Germany throws and moves into West Africa, taking Togoland and the Cameroons, and by also taking Southwest Africa, outflanks Britain in Cape Colony in the south. Britain fears that Germany plans to link up with the Boers of the Transvaal, and from the Cape thrusts northward between them, annexing the vast territory of Bechuanaland. Germany immediately retaliates over on the east coast by taking Tanganyika. Britain sees this as a threat to the chance of establishing a British corridor the length of Africa from the Cape to Cairo, so moves in East Africa to keep that option open. Britain surveys the patchwork of European Africa, huge areas staked out with millions of black men and women taken into civilized protection. And now the stakes are raised. Gold. In 1886, its discovery in the Transvaal made the Boers richer than Rhodes. Under the Witwatersrand Rand lay wealth inconceivable. The metal that sends men mad fills the treasuries and armories of governments that control it. Earlier that year, Paul Kruger, president of the Transvaal, could not raise a loan for £5,000. 3 years later, he had £1 million in the bank. Gold, like diamonds, was solid political power. The players prepare for the end game. Germany and the Transvaal confer. Britain again sees a threat to the hope of a British corridor to the north if Germany and the Transvaal team up in a joint play. The future of the gap is critical. Cecil Rhodes' eyes were on that gap. Mashonaland, Matabeleland, Barotseland. Lobengula, king of the warrior Matabeles, ruled much of the region, and the Mashona were his vassals. Mashonaland was Rhodes' first objective. He raised a private army under the provisions of a charter given to his South Africa Company by the British government. 500 men, heavily armed, formed the British South Africa Police and escorted 200 prospectors and pioneers on a march of 600 miles through unknown country. The objective? Gold and land. Lobengula had granted them mining rights. His people were dismayed when such a force appeared to claim them, and even more so when a fort was built and the British flag was raised. Finding no gold, reaching always for more land, the column came into violent conflict with Lobengula's regiments. Prisoners, when taken, would be punished by company staff and even photographed before execution and after. The guns and the organisation which Rhodes had put into these tribal lands hardened into the company state named after him, Rhodesia. Rhodes himself finally persuaded the Matabele chiefs to accept his authority. The company held and was to hold thereafter Central Africa for Britain. So Britain fills the gap, taking Matabele land, Barotse land, and Nyassa land. Transvaal is encircled, not only encircled, but infiltrated. Gold drew 40,000 foreigners, or Uitlanders, to the Rand, who soon wanted votes as well as gold. Majority rule. Why not? They paid all the taxes. For the 50,000 black workers in the mines, neither Boer nor Briton thought of equal rights or votes. To keep the white miners as politically impotent as the black, President Kruger demanded 14 years residence qualification for the vote. Johannesburg had become a more brazen frontier boom town than even Kimberley. A Cape Town elder statesman called its inhabitants a society that would corrupt an archangel. Kruger's Boer farmers were horrified at the impact of this society on their pastoral, God-fearing community. Rhodes, now Prime Minister of the Cape, saw he could exploit the Uitlanders' political grievances. Kruger defied them.
You foreigners, you newcomers, you thieves and murderers, votes for such a rebel to outvote decent burghers? Never. If they cannot be kept out, they must be kept down.
So the image grew of a despot who made free-born citizens of the British Empire bow down like slaves, while planning himself to rule far beyond the Transvaal. In Johannesburg, a reform committee of Uitlanders campaigned for voting rights and secretly smuggled rifles in for a rising. Leander Starr Jameson was chosen by Rhodes to lead a mounted column to their aid. He had previously masterminded the company's war on the Matabele. Though everyone was sworn to secrecy, Rhodes' plot was soon too well known to succeed by surprise. At the last moment, Rhodes tried to recall the column. But by a misunderstanding, the wires to Cape Town had been cut. On his own initiative, Jameson went on. But on the day, the Uitlanders, having second thoughts, went to the races instead of seizing Johannesburg. While the Boer commandos, knowing all about the plot, moved off to intercept Jameson's 500 company horsemen. At Krugersdorp, they ambushed Jameson's raiders. Jameson had boasted that his Maxim guns would cut a swathe through the Boers as they had the Matabele. Instead, Boer marksmanship from the hills decimated the British, who soon ran out of ammunition and surrendered. A bitter moment for Dr. Jameson when, bound, he became Kruger's prisoner, liable to be shot. Instead, Kruger handed him and his officers over to the British, who were forced to ship them home for trial. The trial became a charade. The sentences were very light. Before long, they were all back in South Africa. Rhodes resigned as Prime Minister and Chairman of De Beers. He seemed almost destroyed and accepted basic responsibility for the initial planning. The Kaiser telegraphed Kruger,
"I congratulate you for preserving your independence without calling on other powers."
Britain's dignity was affronted from the city to the common people. One man, deeply implicated in the raid, became the Empire's voice. Joseph Chamberlain, Colonial Secretary, and virtually Associate Prime Minister. He was determined to draw the Transvaal into a South African Union by forcing Kruger to give the vote to the gold mining community, and he was ready for a showdown. At the Cape, Rhodes remained the idol of the English, but the Dutch Boer community cast him out. The duel was now between Chamberlain and Kruger.
I am not ready to hand over my country to strangers,
said Kruger, who faced a new opponent at the Cape. Chamberlain's agent, Alfred Milner, the brilliant, arrogant proconsul, a perfect example of Rhodes' Oxford man. British society of the day, confident in their rich and exclusive world, did not dream that war could touch them seriously. Unruffled by newspaper hints of an impending crisis, they enjoyed the season. Obviously, Kruger was bluffing. A life of leisure was brought to a pinnacle of affluence by the gold of the Rand and the lavishness of Rand millionaires in London society. The war threat seemed absurd to people enjoying England's beauty in the lazy summer of 1899. All the same, the game was up. What move now in the scramble for Africa? For the moment, the diplomatic game is over. The people of Britain responded with a surge of fervent jingoism. Against this army swagger, the Boer farmers looked unimpressive foes. Few realized their rifles were superior, technically, to the British, or what good shots they were. It would be a grand war to be in, a high adventure.
Goodbye, Dolly, I must leave you, though it breaks my heart to go. Something tells me I am needed at the front to fight the foe. See, the soldier boys are marching, and I can no longer stay. Hark, I hear the bugle calling, goodbye, Dolly Gray.
And those who stayed at home flocked to the new bioscope to see moving pictures of their boys winning the war, as well as avidly reading the dispatches of our war correspondents like Winston Churchill and Edgar Wallace. Everyone is confident in the Commander-in-Chief, Sir Redvers Buller, who had made his name in the Zulu War. But then the shocks began. Kimberley was besieged, with Rhodes inside. So was Mafeking. So was Ladysmith, with half the army inside. One of the garrison was Sergeant Smith.
We were there for 4 months, and of course things went very bad with us. Starvation and all the hardships that you can imagine. Every night we had to be on guard because they used to attack. We never knew when they were going to attack us again. As time went on, we were starting to starve, and we'd eat anything that was on 4 legs. In fact, we've stood in the trenches and poked out a few rats at times and got on with them. And, of course, we didn't relish that too much, but still, we had to have something.
The British public felt it was urgent to lift the sieges and get the troops out. The music halls, as always, made their comment on the military situation, as in this song of a soldier's child.
The Boers have got my daddy, my soldier dad. I don't like to hear my mammy sigh. I don't like to hear my mammy cry. So I'm going in a big ship across the raging main, and I'm going to fight the Boers, I am, and bring my daddy home again.
Bulldog Buller advances again to relieve Ladysmith, while General Methuen advances to the Modder River to save Kimberley. The public, reading the dispatches, got ready for British victories. But the good news didn't come. British generals seemed to lead British troops into disaster after disaster. It was the Boers who had the generals, and the British public began to collect them on cigarette cards. Cronje, De Wet, Joubert, and many more. The War Office, frantic at public criticism, plays its trump card, new British generals. Lord Roberts had offered his services at 67 years of age. He had served successfully in India. He really knew something about strategy, and the troops trusted him. With him came Kitchener, fresh from his triumphs in the Sudan. Between them, they regenerated the nation's confidence. And Rudyard Kipling wrote a poem about their beloved Roberts, which was recited on all sides.
There's a little red-faced man, which is Bobs. Rides the tallest horse he can, our Bobs. If it bucks or kicks or rears, he can sit for 20 years with a smile round both his ears. Can our Bobs? So here's to Bobs Beharder, fighting Bobs, Bobs, Bobs. He's our pucker Kandahada, little Bobs, Bobs, Bobs. He's the Duke of Aggychell. He's the man what done us well. And we'll follow him to hell, won't we, Bobs?
More troops went out, and now the young colonies, the Lions' Cubs, sent their troops to join the British. $6,000 from New Zealand, 8,000 from Canada, 16,000 from Australia. The full might of the empire was massing against two little Boer republics. The music hall set a note of new resolution and gave a reassuring history lesson.
Trouble in the Transvaal and old England wants to know whether Mr. Kruger or John Bull shall boss the show. But Kruger's rather stubborn, grave liberties he took, and now Britons think it time that he was brought to book. And when they say the British boys have come, for old Paul things will fairly hum. We've 3 good men in Buller, Baden, Powell and White. There'll be a hot time in the Transvaal tonight. At Majuba we were careless and we made a great mistake. Now our tactics will be altered, cause we're fairly wide awake. And the lessons that were taught us at Majuba Hill, you know, have been learned by Britain's army, and we're ready for the foe. And when they say the British boys have come, for old Paul things will fairly hum, and they'll soon feel the British Bulldogs bite. There'll be a hot time in the Transvaal tonight.
Good news at last. Roberts beats Cronje at Paardeberg. President Kruger goes into exile, but the war was not over. It went on for almost 2 years more. The Boers abandoned their cities and turned to guerrilla warfare, inflicting defeat after defeat on the stretched forces and communications of the harassed, slower-moving British, even with Kitchener in command. And now, sickness, enteric, began to sweep through the army, whose medical services badly needed a new Florence Nightingale. Sergeant Packer remembers.
It's very hard to get water to drink. Sometimes we got a bottle full issued out to us, but not very often. Well, the water we had to drink was out of the rivers. And there was all horses and all that there, dead horses floating in it, and we had to drink that. And as for clothing, we couldn't get no clean clothes. We had to wash them ourselves when we got the chance to take them off. For 2 whole months on the relief of Ladysmith, we never took a thing off, not even a boot or anything.
Kitchener replied to guerrilla war with a scorched earth policy, burning down the farms where Boer women succoured and supplied their menfolk. But the women and children could not be left to starve without shelter. Concentration camps were built, but the medical services were totally inadequate. The camps became more crowded, more heartrending. Typhoid, rampant in the army, quickly spread to the women and children. At least 20,000 died. And the troops hated this part of the war.
We were going out on the Sear column, fetching the women in and the children and blowing up the farms, because the Boers was getting supplied from them. These women kicked up a hell of a row they did about being taken in. Of course, the Boers had told them that they was taking them in for the soldiers to make use of them. You couldn't interfere with the women or anything. There's 2 chaps at the Manchesters got 10 years each for molesting a Dutch girl.
The British troops struggled after the elusive Boer commandos. It takes 10 regulars to catch 1 guerrilla, and it proved to be a slow and heartbreaking process.
Daytime, we was playing with flies. They used to fly in our eyes, up our nose, in our ears. Oh, dear, oh, Lord. That was terrible. And the chaps in front, he was marching behind, all their backs were all covered in flies. All over them they were. And I expect my back was the same to the chap behind me. And, of course, when it got dark, they went away. And we got the mosquitoes and the lice biting us all night.
Disillusion with the War Office, the army and the generals was now complete, and the British soldier knows how to express his feelings.
I wanna go home. I wanna go home. Of houses and pom-poms I've had quite enough. And the grub that they give us is so bloody tough. Take me over the sea, where the boys can't get at me. Oh my, I don't wanna die, I wanna go home.
But at last the war was ending. The troops were coming home, but leaving 22,000 dead in battle or of disease. Britain had had to put 400,000 men into the field against an army of 40,000. The Boers had lost 4,000 in battle. Kitchener came home bringing with him the Boer surrender. It was a lenient peace, but the Boer had had to swear allegiance to a foreign monarch.
You here, in the presence of our God, acknowledge King Edward to be your liege sovereign. You will henceforth maintain his authority throughout the land, so help you God.
The game was over. In little more than 20 years, the European powers had divided Africa between them. Now Britain completed the pattern by taking the Transvaal and the Orange Free State. Queen Victoria did not live to see the victory of her imperial army, drawn for the first time from many corners of the empire that had grown from such small beginnings in the 63 years of her reign. Crowds that watched her coffin pass had seen the high noon of empire pass with it. Splendid isolation had passed, too. Edward VII would soon be seeking allies, while the Kaiser, who rode with him in the cortege, saw in British military embarrassments a sign that Germany's star was now the rising one. And the war had shaken the moral arrogance of the Victorians to their very foundations. Africa knocked much of the jingoism out of the British, though pomp and pageantry testified to national pride. And perhaps some lessons were learned. Kipling thought so. Let us admit it fairly, as a business people should. We've had no end of a lesson. It will do us no end of good.